This just in. Carson Hill and everyone at Neuma is secretly giving us a coupon code to give to you. From this moment forward, when you're on their website shopping for anything from Neuma, when you go to checkout, in the coupon section, type in Tattoo Guardians, and you just saved an extra 10%. That's Carson and Neuma's gift to all of you for being faithful listeners of our show. Tattoo Guardians, your coupon code. Thanks.
When I was smoking dirt weed, wearing Jinko jeans, and listening to Limp Bizkit's first album, he's like on track to changing the fucking course of the tattoo industry.
It was something that I enjoyed, you know. It's not that I was like super motivated to change the industry or something like that. It was just that I enjoyed doing it. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there with ideas who think that it's harder than it is. I think really all it comes down to is like a strong desire to do whatever it takes to get something completed.
Hello, friends, and welcome to
another episode of the Tattoo Guardians
podcast show with myself,
me, Hip,
and
Josh.
Yeah. Yes. Boys, we got an extra special announcement coming to you right the fuck now. What is it, boys?
What is it, Josh?
Mr. Carson Hill.
Oh, the Carson Hill?
The Carson Hill.
He was just on our show.
He was.
Well, you know it. You was sitting here. Hey, but what's the special announcement? Y'all know that I'm a giver. Y'all know Mr. Carlton's dedicated the rest of his life to being a giver. We know that Hip's a giver. And Mr. Carson Hill was on the show, and he himself was inspired by our giving to what?
This man is going to give away
a tattoo machine.
Not just
any I like the lacing. Not just any tattoo machine, but the
newest. The newest, latest and greatest Neuma machine that he made. He's actually going to give one away, though, for real.
Yes.
For real.
To who?
To a lucky listener. Yeah.
A winner and a listener. You got to be a listener to be a winner.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you need to have been listening to this whole episode, or the episode that Carson is on, for some questions for.
To clarify, did you even listen to this shit? But that's awesome. Carson Hill came on the show, blessed us. It was a great episode. He's a rad dude, and he's giving away a Neuma machine just to our listeners.
Man.
Absolutely.
Happy day.
Speaking from experience, it's a dope machine. It's worth a listen. Yes. And you might be the winner.
And it's a dope episode. Stay tuned to the end for the rest of the details on how to win.
Welcome back, guys. It's good to see you guys again.
Yes.
Keeping the beard short, as you can see.
Man, looking good.
Yeah, it's a lot shorter than I remember.
Yeah, right? Got the new Guardian shirt.
Yes, that looks so good.
Made that. Pretty proud. But today's exciting. I got a good friend, longtime friend, Mr. Carson Hill is joining us. Disruptor of the tattoo industry, the inventor of the Neuma tattoo machine, been tattooing for 23 years. I've actually followed this man's career for a long time because not only a disruptor with the tattoo machines, but a disruptor with tattooing. Yeah. Really early on, killing the biomechanical style, kind of changing the way it flows, bringing much more artistic elements out of it, and then a big lover of skydiving. So let's start with that, Carson. Are you still skydiving nowadays?
Yep. I actually took about 4 years off and just recently came back. I guess I missed it a little bit or something like that.
I feel like I was around. We were at some show and everybody was talking about skydiving, and I kind of feel like maybe I'm wrong. You hadn't done it yet, but you were like, I want to get in on that, right? And then you went with a few people from like maybe it was like Next Generation Machines or something like that. Does that ring a bell?
Okay, kind of. Yeah, you're on track. But so Jared Driscoll, who is associated with Next Generation and Fusion, but we started. I don't remember why he started jumping. I think he'd started on his own and I started on my own. My cousin actually was the one who got me into it originally. And then Jared and I were kind of jumping buddies for a while. Then we both quit for a while. Jared hasn't come back, but he intends to.
And how many jumps? Do you know how many you've done?
It's about 1,800.
Oh my God!
Love
Holy
it.
Shit. Jumping out of a perfectly good airplane. I used to want to do it really bad. I used to be like, I'm down. I probably even told you that back in the day, but I don't know. I'm 47 now, and I'm at that point where it's just not of interest. But I know you stuck with it, and that's got to be fucking absolutely exhilarating. Though I can't even imagine. Like, I mean, you feel like you're flying, right? Like, do you feel like you're falling at that velocity, or do you feel like you're flying?
You feel like you're flying. You're basically keeping pace with the rate of gravity. So all you really feel is the wind, and then you can, and then like a wing, you can use the wind to kind of push you around the sky, and so it actually really does feel like you're flying.
Have you done? Go ahead, Tom.
I just want to clear one thing up. There aren't any perfectly good airplanes out there, and that's why parachutes exist to begin with.
Hey, yeah, exactly. I caught you. Said that you were like, not really. So yeah, good call. Have you done like the wingsuit stuff, like where you can actually?
No, that's not really my thing. That's more of like, I mean, there are plenty of people who do that just from planes. But from my perspective, that's more the kind of thing you get into if you want to do base jumping.
Okay,
and that's just not anything I'm interested in doing.
I'm so funny because I immediately said I'd never do it, and I'm already going, well, shit, maybe. That does sound pretty fucking fun. So
yeah, I was going to say, I know some people who are in their 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s who skydive regularly. So
wow,
I can see how it would be incredibly addictive. 1,800, wow, that's impressive, man. That's impressive.
Have you ever thought about tattooing anyone while you're skydiving?
Oh shit, like just even a dot.
You know what's funny is it's been done, but the thing that when I first got into it, I was at that stage, I was doing the original Neuma, which was air pressure, it's a pneumatic. So I had an idea that I was going to create this thing that it would collect air as I'm falling through the air, like a cone, and then do a skydive powered tattoo. I thought that would be pretty cool, but we never ended up doing it.
Wow.
So see, this is a perfect lead into my, like I said, I've known Carson for a long time. This is one of the reasons that I'm so impressed. Carson is an engineer.
Yeah.
I think that's safe to say. Yeah. And when I call him a disruptor, it's because he was bringing, new things to the tattoo industry, and they definitely disrupted the industry. But instead of just having like a loud idea, he followed through on it. And from what I remember, not only did you invent the pneumatic tattoo machine, which was literally air powered and was really, really huge. I remember going to conventions and like they were everywhere. People were figuring out how to get their compressors, to these shows and everything, but very, very innovative. So like even to have this idea of not just jumping out of an airplane and doing a tattoo, Carson's got this brilliant, beautiful idea of how to do it, which we'll talk about new inventions that Carson's come up with more recently. But it's that brain of yours that I'm super, super impressed with. And I know when we talked on the phone, you said you were still tattooing a bit as well. Mm-hmm. And, I've just watched your work continuously grow and grow and grow. And, like I said, we've been friends for a long time, but just from one man to another, super impressed, always been a huge fan of your work. Regret that I have not been tattooed by you yet. And as I'm healing from chemotherapy, if you're still working, I would love to get some work from you someday, just to get some of that,
Yeah, I would love to. And I appreciate the compliment. I would say I've always known your work as well, and always really looked up to your style. And
thank you.
You also have a very unique approach to tattooing that is like very distinct, and people, who know your work. And
right. And I appreciate that, because that's the thing is like, when you spot somebody's work across the room, especially something like, say, you do a lot of biomechanical work, and because there's a lot of biomechanical work out there, you always were able to tell that innovative light source, it just stood out. It wasn't just, because even nowadays I'll find these like amazing tattoo artists, and I always have to remind myself, like, it's so good, but I can't tell from the next so good guy or girl, you know what I mean? So it's just always been, we've talked about it on past episodes. I really like that, Matt, were you about to say something?
Well, now I forget. But I'm loving just being a fly on the wall for a minute while these two legends acknowledge each other.
Man, well, yeah, let's bring up a couple of things. So, do you remember, Carson, your first kind of idea of like the idea for the Neuma, the original Neuma? Was it just kind of like hey, I think this could work? Were you already kind of tinkering with things? Did you feel that there was a need, like a lot of inventions are like, unnecessarily made. Did you feel like there was a need? Because one of the things I noticed with it, and I don't know if it was intentional, you have these amazing artists, Nico Hurtado, Mike DeVries, using these machines. And one of the things that they were doing was layering and building. It seemed like Mike DeVries could build for 10 layers and things would heal perfectly. And coil machines were you couldn't do it unless you were just this absolute master at tuning, which most of us were not. Right. So is that one of the voids you were looking to fill, or did that just kind of happy accident?
Yeah, I think you might like this answer because you were explaining how your podcast is at least partly based around extracting positivity from life and from circumstance and stuff like that. And that's really how it was born. My mentor, and if he ever listens to this podcast, I hope he can at least understand my come from on this, but he wasn't the most optimistic guy in the world. And he was kind of hard on himself, I think. And he was older than me, about maybe 10 years older than me. And we would commute to work together. And on one of the days, he was having kind of a down on himself kind of attitude day. And I think it was something like he wasn't sure that having chosen tattooing was the best decision for him long term, that kind of a thing.
Right.
And I remember basically my attitude or my response to that was something along the lines of like, it's not too late, and you can always make changes in your life and do whatever you want, basically.
Right.
And he was like, I think I made the example of, you could always make something for, that people could use in the world or something like that. And he's like, well, give me an example. And I kind of just like spit it out. I think I said something like, you could make a new type of tattoo machine. And he's like, well, what do you mean? Wow. And I just kind of spit it out as an example of like, well, this is how you could, life isn't over yet,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he was like, oh, you think you could do that? And that's kind of just the very first part of how it all began. And, it was a long process after all of that. But I think ultimately it started off as, well, let's see, can I potentially make something like this?
Yeah.
And so I tried and I kept trying, and it started to feel more promising. And, eventually we had prototypes, and then 2 or 3 prototypes, and they kept getting better. And so there was momentum there. And I always enjoyed it. The whole process to me is, at least as satisfying as doing a tattoo or a painting or something like that.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. One of the things that Neuma brought as well is it was tiny. You know what I mean? You have to understand, guys, that rotaries I don't think they were really around at all, if very little.
Yeah.
And so not only did Carson come up with this completely new way, they were really tiny. The body was very, very lightweight. I believe aircraft aluminum for the most part, right?
Yep.
Super lightweight. You obviously had to have a different setup with the air compressor and all that stuff. But so just going to these shows and seeing these tiny machines was immediately good selling points for Carson, because it was like, ooh, what is that? And then you had these ridiculous artists, because there was a big movement in tattooing going on with realism.
Yeah.
Nico and Mike, and both Mike Damasi were really at the helm of this movement, as well as Carson. Yeah. And so people were like, what is that? Is that responsible for doing that? How can I buy it? Mm-hmm. So like, it was such a game changer. It was so, I wish you guys, well, Matt, you were around, Yeah. You've watched it. It was so fascinating, because it was just like this new thing, and a lot of questions and stuff like that. So as somebody who's tinkered around with inventing things, and, I made my own, I cast my own tattoo machines, but like going from like, I guess, a CAD drawing, just learning how to scale, did you have some background already with engineering type of stuff? Like, how did you know, like, where do I go with this sketch on a napkin to somehow 3D? Because with 3D printers, I don't know if they were probably available in big factories, I'm assuming, but not. Was that really difficult to, like, how do you get that prototype in your hand?
Yeah. Well, you called me an engineer. I'm not an engineer.
At least engineer brain. You definitely think like an engineer.
Like,
you have to.
Yeah, I can visualize mechanisms pretty like in my imagination. So I think that's the thing that I have going for me. And I don't remember how I figured it out back then. I probably asked a lot of questions because that's kind of the thing that I have always done. But ultimately, I landed on industrial design. So industrial designers exist as like a service, and so I found one that I could afford at the time, which was not much. I think I was 19 years old. It was
wow,
or maybe 20. It was like 1998 or 1999 or something like that when the first prototype was made.
Wow.
And so yeah, I just found some guy in his garage who was willing to make me a prototype. It was super crude and not fancy at all, and we used a gear instead of a impeller because we were just throwing stuff together just
to see.
Yeah, like proof of concept kind of ideas.
Right. Okay.
And yeah, I just like saved up a little bit of money, and I was working as a tattoo apprentice at the time, so I really didn't have much money at all. I actually borrowed a little bit of money from one of my grandparents. And so it was a very slow process for me. I think that first prototype might have taken me a couple of years to do.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is I'm betting that by the time I was aware of it and it was in these hands of these amazing artists, you had done a couple of years of extensive homework already, trial and error and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, probably 10 years actually.
That's crazy. Wow. When I was smoking dirt weed, wearing Jinko jeans, and listening to Limp Bizkit's first album, he's like on track to changing the fucking course of the tattoo industry.
Well, I was also smoking dirt weed too, so it was something that I enjoyed. It's not that I was like super motivated to change the industry or something like that. It was just that I enjoyed doing it, and I think that I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people out there with ideas and who think that it's harder than it is. I think really all it comes down to is like, a strong desire to do whatever it takes to get something completed.
And I think that's why, I think that's part of its success is because your heart was obviously so into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I remember even talking to you about your packaging. Like I hadn't seen, if it was at some show and you had some new version and it reminded me of the iPhone in the box. And at the time I hadn't really seen anybody care. You order a tattoo machine from a builder and they're amazing, but it shows up in a box and you had this presentation about you. You know what I mean? I just always admired that as somebody who has like big goals in life. I was like, see, Carson's paying attention to these little things, like you didn't really rest on your laurels either. You had the original Neuma, and then eventually I'm assuming there was iterations in between, but there was an attachment to basically make it to where it used a regular motor, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Was that something you want to talk about? Was that
Sure. Yeah, that was basically the biggest mistake that I ever made as a tattoo machine builder. And I wouldn't necessarily call it a mistake because I learned a lot in the process. But
what were some of the problems?
There was a lot of problems. So yeah, first to answer your question, basically on the bottom of the impeller was 6 magnets, and then on the top of the motor there was a plate with the same magnets in reverse polarity. So, and then it just kind of actually have one sitting right here. Oh, funny.
Nice.
So it would clip. I don't have the module, but it would clip onto the bottom here. Yeah. And then, so there's actually no physical connection between the two sides. It would be just that magnetic connection. So this plate was a type of plastic. Yeah. And so they would magnetically link, and as the motor turned the plate, it would turn the impeller. Wow. Which we thought was really great. But of course, there was a lot of complications with all of that. So for example, if one of the 6 magnets came out, it became a brake. It was just in the way and would slow the whole thing down. There was also we worked on having the consumption of air be a little bit less than the original. And so there was this gasket that was a little bit of a, pain in the ass to kind of get it just right. Yeah. So that was always getting in the way. And I think ultimately, there was manufacturing issues. It was a really complicated, this part here was a super complicated piece.
Really?
And so it took way longer than it should have. It was like a 13 operation process in a CNC machine, which is,
oh, wow.
it's just too much for
right.
you know.
So ultimately, you took a break for quite a while.
Yep.
I remember you could order them, then they just seemed like they weren't really around anymore. When I first moved to Oregon 10 years ago, there's a shop down the street that they all used them, and they had an extra set. And I remember trading a tattoo for 2 machines. I remember I called Nico up. No, I called Mike DeVries up and was asking his thoughts on it and stuff. And I remember him saying, he's like, yeah, you could layer the chin for 10. You know, at the time I was really into like building up my tattoos. I don't really do that anymore, but I do remember it was so different. Have you guys, Matt, did you ever use a pneumatic machine ever?
No, I was intimidated by them because, again, like I think my first in-person encounter was at Hell City in probably 07, 08, around those years, and it was Damasi, DeVries, and Mario, and they were like collabing, I think doing like a multicolored Marilyn Monroe portrait all on the same client.
I remember that. I totally remember that. Yeah.
And I think like the day before, Mike DeVries won Best of Day for that Jack Black portrait he did.
Yep.
And it was either Saturday or Sunday. They collabed together almost just for fun, but they had those machines. They had an air compressor in their booth, and it seemed like these are badasses that just showed up from Pluto that had everything that we just can't even have access to, you know?
Yeah, the crew was so great because I remember that show very well, and it was like they just fucking cleaned house everywhere they went. You know what I mean? It was just like the marketing, I don't know if it was on purpose, but the marketing was like, it reminds me of Apple. Like Apple will spend time getting their color just right, so you want it. The Neuma had this power, to me at least. You just like, ooh, you just want it. You know what I mean? So I remember when getting back to how it kind of disappeared for a while. Did you feel like you were kind of over that and you just remained tattooing? Because I think it was many years, right? I mean, it's been many years before this new iteration of Neuma 4, which we can talk about in a moment here. Was that something that you were always kind of kicking around in the back of your head, or?
Yeah, so in I think it was 09, me and DeVries and Damasi and a bunch of those guys all got together, and Guy Aitchison. Yeah, so we did a whole bunch of research together as a team with like 40-ish machines of different styles and types and stuff. And so during that whole process, I determined some things about tattoo machines, basically, and kind of decided what was needed or what was missing or what was the difference between what I was seeing. And so I kind of made a decision of what I wanted a tattoo machine to do, but it took me a really long time to really figure out how to do it. In the beginning, so yeah, I was kind of tossing the idea around for a while, but the reason that I ultimately chose, let me turn that off. Reason that I chose to take a break was because the hybrid was really a disaster, and it was really a letdown for everybody. People who were using it, the customers, the people who were selling it, the people, myself.
Sure.
And so I ultimately decided that machine, we couldn't sell it anymore. It was a disaster. So I had to step away from that, and I didn't really know how to do it or what I was doing or anything like that. And but so the idea for what is now called the Neuma 4 was kind of always in existence ever since back then. I just didn't know how to achieve it. And so I went through multiple different ideas of how that could be achieved, but there was a lot of failures. And to be honest, it's not like I was spending all of that time. It was about 7 years that I wasn't selling machines.
Right.
6 or 7 years. So it's not like I was spent that entire time like in the lab, working on it. It wasn't like that at all. But I did go through multiple different ideas that didn't work. And ultimately learned that simplicity was my friend. And I was trying to get a little bit too into the tech of it, like the mechanism or the waveforms. You know what I'm talking about when I talk about waveform.
Yes.
I was trying to achieve that with more of like a technological approach, and I still think that some of those ideas could be used when certain other technologies catch up.
Yeah.
But as of right now, there just isn't, like, for example, I won't make the example actually, but let's just say that the physical mechanism was the smart way to go about it, doing it ultimately.
Right.
And then, even the design of that mechanism took a couple of years as well. And I don't know if I'm coming back to answer your question or not, but
you're covering it. Yeah.
Okay.
So Matt and Hip, I know you use these machines and you love them. Are you understanding what the idea of the waveform is? Like, you understand the process of it and how it works and everything, Hip?
Yeah, I do now.
I mean, obviously for our listeners, Carson would be the best to explain it, but I'm just trying to think. I keep interrupting. I apologize. But like when I first heard of it, it's it took me a second. You know what I mean? And it's like, is this something that's really new? I'm always like, is this really needed kind of thing? And when I talked to Carson on the phone and he broke it down, it makes 100% sense to me. And it seems to me logically like the way we should be moving forward. So I guess the question I should have asked you, Hip, is what are some of the benefits that you've noticed? Because you've got options.
Right.
You've got several different cams.
Well, okay. So first off, like this all, how I even stumbled into this, it was divine intervention almost, because me and you, I was talking to you a lot and you were critiquing my work and we were talking about give, and for whatever reason, I was just like, I was like the hesitant artist to go and buy too many machines. I didn't want to be the dude that had a box full of different machines or whatever. For whatever reason, it doesn't matter. But, you told me about that. And then I was driving home from the shop one day and was listening to Fireside. And Jake was interviewing Carson. And, like, they started talking about, like, this tat wizardry. And they were talking about, like, there was something where he said something about give, and Carson said something along the lines like what you said, which is like, it's not necessarily the give, it's how quick the needle retracts from the skin depending on how the machine's set up. So like, right. I literally pulled over and watched it on YouTube, the interview, and couldn't really get a grasp on it. But what was very attractive to me is like, Carson said that like here at Neuma, like, don't hesitate to reach out to us. I'll talk to you personally and like help explain. And, if you don't choose our machines, that's cool, but I want to get you on the right direction to where whatever you want is best suited for you. And like the next day I called him and he said something too that was very, that made a lot of sense to me, which is like, we make so much money. And like we can get a machine and it'll last years, triple, quadruple, 10 times what we paid for it we'll make, in a couple months. And it's like really peanuts if you think about it.
Absolutely.
And I called him and he kind of explained it to me. I was nervous and was just basically like, yeah, smiling and nodding. Yeah, it totally makes sense. And then I bought 2 of the machines. And while I was waiting for them to come, dude in Michigan was selling one. I actually got one of each here. So this one was one that I bought. I've got 2 of those, and this was the one I got from Michigan, which is like the stainless model. And I just ordered 2 more of these because they got them in my favorite color, black. And they're like heavy. Like it reminds me of like running a coil with a fucking a metal grip. Carson, you just said like simplicity was your friend.
Yeah, he said I learned that along the process. One of the lessons, because we said he's either going to win or going to learn.
Right.
And once he said mistake, then he was quick to be like, actually, these were some of the greatest lessons. And one of them was he learned that simplicity is his friend.
And it's, yeah, he's not lying. Like it's without a screwdriver or a Allen wrench, it's literally 3 pieces, and you get some other cams with it, 20, 30, 33, and 40. Is that correct, Carson?
Yep, 20 and 28, 33 and 40.
28. And I'm not even going to go into like exactly what each one is. I'll leave that for you, but it's as simple as just unscrewing the motor out, pulling the cam out and adjusting it, whether you want to line, black and gray, blend, or color pack. And I've kind of experimented with all of them. And I appreciate that like there's two of them. I think I don't want to say spoiled, but I got used to having one machine. And when he was explaining like the science behind how they worked, it kind of reminds me of like biking, right? I'm an avid mountain biker and I'm an avid road biker, where there's not just one bike that can suit both of those worlds. So you kind of have to get a mountain bike and then a good road bike. And it made sense the way he was explaining it. It's like you can get real close to having one machine that fits all, but ultimately, like, there's some things that you're going to need in one. So a liner, and then, you know, my shader, whatever it'll be, however I have it set up, if I'm packing or doing black and gray. So it made sense. And I was like, well, you know, I'll give it a shot and try it out. But, you know, I fell in love with the fact that, like, I can call a professional, credible company and actually speak to like the inventor behind this, and has no, you know, because a lot of times people like that just seem so far out of touch, and he was kind of down to earth and shit and explained it to me, and I appreciated that more than what the machine was going to run like, because, you know.
Absolutely.
Well, and even though Hip said he didn't want to be the guy to just own all these machines just because, and then you stop like, well, never mind, that don't matter. But I will say, to validate, you know, his choice right now using the machines you're using, is I've watched him use and go through almost every badass machine on the market. If it was a heavy hitting, a great machine that a lot of the true players were using, you two owned it and used it. And so by you making the jump to these Neumas, isn't from a place of ignorance or not having tested or owned the others. Actually, you're the guy that's not only tested but used and owned all of them. And amongst them all, because you got other good machines, you have selected to run with these. And I think that says a lot.
Well, correct. And, you know, you got a motherfucker like Joshua Carlton giving you direction and talking about what I think give or any of this stuff means. Yeah. And he's like, yeah, dude, like this. And then I just happened to like hear Carson talking about the very same thing. And I'm like, you know, this is a sign, you know, maybe take a step in this direction, see where this rabbit hole goes.
Nice.
And that's the thing about tattooing for so many years for both Carson and I. You know, we've got this experience with all of these, you know, it starts out as anecdotal evidence, and then you just learn like these things actually work, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, as somebody who's sponsored by a tattoo machine company, you know, you think that I'm going to sit up here and say, yeah, Carson's machines are cool, but what you really want to buy is I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm going to be honest with my listeners, like different machines for different people. Like I know it works for me, but I've told Carson this multiple times. It's not just because you're on the podcast. I've never heard a bad thing about Neuma 4. It's kind of weird. It's like, it doesn't really work that way. You know what I mean? Everybody, like if you go to the forums and stuff, when Neuma 4 pops up, everybody's like, just buy it. Trust me. I've even seen just buy it. And if you don't like it, I'll fucking buy it from you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that speaks incredible volumes to me. You know, and as somebody that's been friends with him for a long time, I can kind of, hey, I can vouch Carson's a great guy. I don't personally have experience with the machines, but man, I think I wrote you several months ago, Carson, saying, hey, I'm doing these seminars almost on the daily, and your machines come up constantly. Wow. And I just wanted you to know. I just wanted to let him know, like, that he did something right. Yeah. So it's nice to have my friend Hip, you know, after kind of talking to him about them, like, to kind of hear his feedback, because he's, you know, obviously an incredible tattooer. I think it's probably made your tattooing easier. It's certainly not made it any worse, because it's incredible still. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Well, I mean, fuck, I've gotten. I actually 2 are arriving tomorrow. The new.
I mean that speaks volumes. But so you know, again, not just because you're on the show, but like, to me, tattooing for 30 years, you don't really hear. I mean, of course, somebody out there is going to say something, but I've just personally, across the board, people are just like, buy it. That's kind of incredible.
It really
is. Great to hear.
Yeah, it really is.
So basically, you got a lot of room to fuck it up. Just kidding.
Gotta be careful, right? No pressure.
You know, and I've even seen things, and I could be wrong here. I think there may have been a slight issue with some of the earlier cams, and if Carson jumped on it, replaced them, fixed them. They're better now, and it wasn't even like they were bad. There's just some kind of slight issue, right?
Yeah, we had an issue, and we sent out, I think, 300 sets or something like that, and maybe 5% of them were failing. So we ended up we redesigned the entire thing to make it stronger and used a new material that we had more confidence in, and then did a product recall and just replaced, I think it might have been like 350 sets of people, which, it was a little bit of a stress here for us, because, and particularly for my Lena, who handles most of the customer interactions and stuff like that. But I felt like it was our obligation. We basically sold parts that didn't, we weren't super confident we're working, and that's just not a good way to do business. So
and so that's a great example of a tattoo guardian. We are full of transparency, and we if we say we're going to do it, we do it. So that's a great example of why we ask you to be on this show, because to me that really, integrity really carries an awful lot of weight with me, with all of us. Yeah. And so if I were looking into a company and I was hearing these stories about you having my back, I'm much more likely to purchase from you. Mm-hmm. So these are the types of things. We live in a day and age where companies you have to be transparent. Yeah. So moving forward, as anything new that I do, I've started a new clothing company. Those are the types of things that are in my mind constantly. Like, hey, we thought this would work. This cool ink that glows in the dark looks cool on a shirt, but we found out it looks cool after 3 washes, and it doesn't. We're going to recall these shirts. We're going to refund, whatever. You got to lose a little bit of money sometimes to make sure you're doing, you're standing up for these people you're selling to.
Yeah. And I don't really compare my business to other tattoo equipment manufacturers or tattoo machines specifically. Like, I don't really see it as competition. I mean,
sure, yeah, and that's what I was meaning. Like, there's different machines, because I love the machines that I use. Like, I the Flight Nano. I'm Inkjet, as somebody sponsored me. I absolutely love their equipment. Their machines are extremely good to me. It would be very difficult for me to switch. You know what I mean? Yep. But I can appreciate, and I can certainly tell people the good truth.
Yeah, and ultimately, we have the same goal. Like, for example, Inkjet and myself, our goal is similar in that we're trying to produce something that will benefit the industry ultimately. And so it's not a competitive thing. But I would say that I compete with my old self. As long as I'm performing better than I was, then I'm happy. So,
and I think that's the ultimate goal. I think we talk about that a lot. That's actually pretty cool to hear you say, right, Matt? Yeah, it's definitely a huge thing for us. I only compete with myself. Right?
Yeah. One of my favorite ancient scriptures is, your gift makes room for you. Therefore, it doesn't matter if there's 100 or 1,000 other machine builders or anyone doing the same thing you're doing or something very similar. It does not matter, because your gift makes room for you. And my God, we need you to be you. And you're a great example, Carson, in realizing, and so in that vein, there is no such thing as comparison. It's you staying true to your own vision, your own heart, and setting out to be the best version that you can be. And when you do that, the rest of us benefit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it also reminds me a little bit of the abundance versus scarcity mentality. The world is filled with abundance, and there is nothing. There's nothing but room for more for everyone. So it's not like we're competing to get a share of the same pool of something like that. It's not the way it works.
Yes,
absolutely.
That's damn right. But so many tattoo artists don't realize that.
Right.
Carson, thank you. Man, folks, thanks for tuning in. What a great episode.
Carson, would you mind? I feel like I could explain your system okay, but obviously you're going to do it much better than me. For our listeners out there that are maybe considering looking into this, can you explain what the waveform is and what exactly is going on here?
Yep. So, I mean, technically, I don't know that waveform is the actual word, but it's the closest way to describe what's happening. So waveform is so in terms of frequencies, right? You have, so you have the vibration going from one side to the other in the frequency, right? So the waveform is effectively, if you were to map the way that looks on paper, it's such a hard thing to describe. But basically, the waveform would be the form or that looks like a wave.
Right.
That's created. If you were to graph it, if this is movement and this is time. So if this is your needle and it's going in and out, so there's your movement and this is time, then as it's doing that, it's creating that shape. It's called the waveform there.
Right.
We call it the waveform. So how that's relevant in tattooing is that specifically with rotaries, because they're on this rotating circular cam, the needle has to go all the way to its extended position before it can go back to its retracted position. It can't cut the corner there. So that poses a problem with certain circumstances, like, for example, lining. You get, like if you've ever used a coil, the waveform of a coil, it has it's kind of like this real sharp and then sort of a slow. So if this is the needle coming out, by the way, if we're looking at the needle going up.
Okay.
On the down or the retracted portion of its cycle, it's spending a lot more time there, and it comes up and it gets out really quick. So basically the needle is getting in and out of the skin really, really quickly, and then it spends more time back here building up energy and going back to the extended position. And so that results in, like, your hand is free to move around smoothly.
Nice.
As compared to a rotary, where it spends the same amount of time in every position of that stroke, that creates complication, because basically that just means that it spends a lot more time in the extended position than the coil does. And what that means is, if you've ever switched from a coil to a rotary, you'll notice there's something holding you back here. Like you can't smoothly and quickly whip through stuff. And so it's almost like you feel this feedback of the skin pushing back against your hand. And that's that sort of dragging in the skin and almost catching, where the needle hasn't come out of the skin yet and you're moving forward. Whereas with a coil, it's getting in and out, and so you can move forward more quickly. So what we've done is taken and basically manipulated that waveform to, because it's going to have that hesitation. It's inevitable that it has that hesitation. And then unfortunately, because you're translating a circular motion into a oscillating motion, the hesitation occurs at the extended position and then at the retracted position. So not in the middle ever, only at the extended and at the retracted position. So my original cam, which is the 20%, the idea was really exaggerated, and that one is basically it forces the needle to hesitate in the retracted position. So roughly half of its life cycle, it's just sitting there doing nothing. And then the other half of its life cycle, it's in and out, or extended, retracted. And so what that ultimately translates to mean is that within the entire cycle of one stroke, 50% of the hesitation in the extended position has been reduced or removed. So in other words, rather than it just constantly doing the same thing, it goes out, back, wait, out, back, wait, rather than out, wait, back, wait, out, wait, back, wait. And so, of course, it still has a little bit of a hesitation here, but it's been reduced by 50% because of geometry. You can't eliminate it entirely.
Right. Wow. So, like, it's interesting because you got these coil machines, you got these rotary machines, and we just kind of like, this is what we get. You know what I mean? And you kind of learn your hand around said machine. But now we have these different options. Did you notice hip pretty early on? Like, were you feeling that difference? Did you have to play with a lot of different cams, or did you kind of catch on pretty quick?
With the liner, I used what was intended for the 20%, and just off the rip was like, so ultimately, if to give a visual, I usually run my liners with these particular machines at about 7 volts. Every size liner from a fucking 3 tight all the way up to an 11 bold lays a fatty line, perfect, smooth. And with the shader, I'm slow, so I'm usually at like 6 volts. And the other day I used 11 round or a 7 round shader, 9 mag, 13, and then a 45, and left it at the same volts, and it just packed like
no problems with the 45 even. Wow.
No.
So Carson definitely did fill a void then, because forever rotaries, it was always, you're never going to be able to line with the rotary as well as a coil. Some new machines have been coming out, that say they line well, and I'm hearing good things about, but that's one of the things I heard a lot about with the Neuma 4 is that it just lines just absolutely beautiful. Because I used to say, people would always say, oh, it lines like a coil. And back in the day, I'd go, what else lines like a coil? A fucking coil. Like I would try to push that mentality. Right. But, obviously the pen style machine is nice to have. And if it can really do its job, then I think a lot of people are going to be very interested. So that's good. That's great to hear, because you do a lot of lining, you do a lot of mixed style, and it's so incredibly important that your lines are nice and crisp and like in there correctly,
And listening to him the first time I heard him kind of explain like what the waveform was, I didn't really understand until like once I got the machines and I like looked at the coils. There's been times like after I've done tattoos where like I've just like held a couple of them up because the bottom of them, they're actually it's circular, but they're in a wave form up and down.
You've held a couple of the cams up, that you're saying?
Yeah, just trying to see like with my eye if I could see the slight difference. You can't, right. But I'm a tinkerer, and I always like to like see how things work and like understand and get a visual image in my head. So yeah, it's once I got that tangible piece in my hand and was looking at it, it helped me understand more mentally, like, oh, I'm understanding now. And then when Guy was talking about running a high-speed camera and actually seeing the needle hit the skin slowed down, it just makes more sense to me now. I don't know if I can visually explain it other than just saying like, just trust me.
What is it? Delrin? What's the cam made out of? What's material?
It's PEEK. Yep, PTFE impregnated PEEK. So, and I was going to say that the one thing I would say, because you were saying like, oh, it lines like a coil, why not just use a coil, right? And totally get it. The one thing that I would say is, so we're actually still only talking about the 20%, the liner cam. But we have 4 different cams, and that's the one thing that a coil cannot do. You cannot slow it down so that the needle spends more time hesitating. Right.
And that's something I've definitely struggled with in the past as well. Absolutely.
And there is a benefit to that. Like my initial thought was, oh, that's bad. You don't want anything. You don't want any of that, which is why I started. I didn't have intentions of making multiple cams in the beginning. It was just make the best one. But then I realized that there were benefits to having it slowed down as well. So for example, I was going to ask you, Hip, if you were describing using the 45 and doing all of those different configurations, was that all with the 20% cam?
No, so I'll have the 20% for my liner, and that particular instance I was talking about, I was using the 28. The black and gray shader is what.
Yep. Okay.
But I've also used the 45 with the 40% too, and just same consistency.
Cool.
He reduced it by 50%. I mean, Carson, do you ever get to the point of, man, why don't you guys just quit your bitching and turn your power supply up? You want me to come do your tattoo for you?
Well, so just so that I know I'm understanding the question, I know you're making a joke, but a lot of people ask me like, well, why don't I just turn up the speed?
Yeah.
If the whole thought process is get the needle in and out quicker.
Yeah.
I don't actually know the short version of that answer, but it doesn't seem to solve the problem. I also know that some people ask me like, or they'll say like, a longer stroke will achieve the same thing. Which in a sense it does. So as an example, let's say you have a machine with 5 millimeters of stroke, and you're actually only the needle is penetrating to a 1 millimeter of depth, right? So that's 20% of the cycle that the needle is interacting with the skin. And so that in a sense would be achieving the 20% of that, what our cam is achieving. It's the same thing. 20% of its cycle is spent poked into the skin, and 80% is not. The problem is that the way that the geometry of a cam works is that because it's a circle, it's a perfect circle, right? And so your needle it's kind of like this train wheel effect. And then what happens is your speed happens on the sides, and then as it comes up here, it starts to decelerate, and then it kind of has this whole section where that's where the hesitation exists, where it's like needle's out and it's waiting, and then it comes back and it waits, but it decelerates first. So it's really fast right in the middle, then it slows down, then it stops, then it slowly returns, and then it speeds up, and then it slows down and it stops, and then slowly. So if your 1 millimeter of your 5 millimeter stroke machine is where you're poking, then most of that is happening in the decelerated zone. And that's really not what you want when you're lining. You want the needle to be going really fast and hitting really hard, you know?
Right.
I don't know if that made
that completely
sense.
makes sense, because forever we've heard, even with coils, you know what I mean? Like, just turn it up. And it's like, speed's not necessarily doing what a lot of people think that it's doing. Yeah. There's a lot more to it, especially with the angle of the springs. We're talking coils, but so I'd assume it's very similar to that.
Yep.
Have you had? Sorry, go ahead.
I was just telling Matt, I just took the cams out to let him look at it, to like get a visual of like, you know, what Carson was explaining.
So it's super easy to change them, it looks like.
Oh, easy, super easy. Like literally just unscrew,
right,
pop it out, put the other one in, and which was a question. You know, I wouldn't necessarily, me personally, wouldn't do it during a tattoo, just for contamination purposes or whatever, which, I mean, it's fully autoclavable too. Bonus, shameless plugs over here. But that's why I got two, so I don't have to like,
right.
You know, you're already, tattoos take forever anyway, at least in my world they do. And it's like, I don't want to spend, and I'm a dude that switches, like sometimes I'll be lining, sometimes I'll be shading. I put line work in my realism, so it's like sometimes I decide to line, sometimes I decide to shade. I go back and forth, and the last thing I want to do is like keep switching them out. So it's like, fuck it, just get two machines.
Right. You make money. You're a tattooer.
Yeah.
Have you had much luck with batteries? I mean, are there certain batteries you recommend, Carson, that work well with it? I know some don't play well with others, you know?
Well, this particular motor is super battery friendly, so we really haven't had any problem batteries.
Okay.
I have my personal preferences, and we generally will recommend critical just because it's nice, it's high quality, and it lasts long. And then also it complements the shape. In other words, like it doesn't hang off the back in a weird way. It kind of just stays linear.
Just extends it a little bit. Okay.
Yeah. And then because those are kind of expensive, we also we'll tell people if they think $200 for a battery is a bit much, we'll have them look at those. Now I can't remember the name of them. Damn.
We talked about batteries on another episode where we were trying to figure out some of the really cheap batteries, if they were actually doing the same thing, whether it was like a relay of just turning the battery on and off really fast. Do you know much about that?
Not a ton. I'm not an electrical.
Sure.
But I do know that a lot of people will tell me that when they switch from like the super cheap Amazon stuff to a critical, they do notice a change.
Notice an actual difference. Okay.
It'll last longer. It feels more consistent and predictable. Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. Definitely buy what you can afford. I always say that, to buy the best you can afford, for sure.
Yeah.
So it sounds to me like you've really got things dialed in pretty well. Are there new things for Neuma on the horizon? Do you have some new ideas? Is it Neuma 5 like someday on the horizon, or is it? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do have some thoughts as far as that goes. I think that we're still a ways out from a Neuma 5, but eventually, yeah.
Yeah.
For now, we're really focused. I mean, we just did some rebranding and some new packaging, and we're rebuilding our website and stuff like that. But we're also really focused on disposable grips because people really want them. And so yeah, we're doing that, and we have a couple of other little things in the works that I don't really want to talk about just yet because it's kind of it's a super unique little device that we're offering that will kind of fundamentally potentially fundamentally change the way it works. So,
Ooh, that's exciting.
Yeah, I don't want to give away too many of the secrets.
Right.
When you're ready, we'll have you back on to tell the world.
Awesome.
For sure. That's awesome.
So,
go ahead, Josh.
I was just going to say to our listeners, I know you're probably excited about this. If you're watching this on YouTube, we'll make sure to put a link down below.
Yeah.
Can they order these today? Like, are these, obviously this is going to air maybe a couple of weeks, but it's for right now, they're in stock and they're ready to go, right?
Yep. Everything's in stock. We got tons of them. I would say the one thing that might be a good idea to mention is configurations. That's one of the things that we are kind of known for, let's say. And that's, like a lot of the other machines out there, it's just kind of like there's one machine.
Right.
Or there might be multiple different machines, right? But we only sell one machine, but there are multiple different ways to configure it. And I think that a lot of times people might get a little bit intimidated or confused.
Sure.
So I guess the one thing I would mention is that really it's all about preference. So the cam, as far as the cams goes, and the percentages of the cams and all that, every machine comes with all of them. So all you really need to do is choose your grip diameter, choose the stroke length that you want, and whether or not you want steel or aluminum. And the reasons you would choose steel versus aluminum are if you want light or heavy. So aluminum is lighter, steel is heavier. So it's all preference, and then color, Okay. That's about it.
What are the options on stroke length from minimal to maximum?
2.75 is our shortest.
Okay.
And then we have a 3.6 and a 4.2. And the one thing I would also mention when it comes to like the super long strokes with this machine, it's different in that a lot of times like nobody's tattooing to a depth of 4.2 millimeters.
Right. We hope not.
Right. So I think that what has started to happen is people have started to associate longer strokes with better liners when it comes to rotaries. Mm-hmm. And I think that is because of what I was describing earlier with trying to achieve, they're not trying to achieve the waveform because that's just not what they're doing. But I guess the short version of what I'm saying is that you don't need a long stroke to get a really good line with this machine because of the way that the geometry of the cam is created. So, and what I generally will tell people is that the 3.6 is ideal for most circumstances. And then, the only time most people would ever really want the long stroke is for, let's say you're working on like a large guy on his like kidney area or armpit where it's just kind of hard to reach and it's really spongy skin.
Right.
That's really the only circumstance that people end up finding themselves wanting that longer stroke.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you said all the cams come with them, do you have like a general recommendation of like, we tend to recommend this cam for black and gray, stuff like that?
Yeah. So they all come built with the 20% installed. That's the liner, but it's also that's the cam that most people will like fall in love with. That's what makes people really, wow, this is different.
Okay.
So what I would say is start with the 20 and tattoo with it for a while. It doesn't have to be only lines.
Right.
But familiarize yourself with it for a little while and then start to experiment with the other cams. So the way it works is the 28, it slows down the extension of the needle, but the recoil is still as fast as the 20.
Gotcha.
And then the 33 slows down the extension as much as possible, but the recoil is still as fast as the 20 and the 28. And then the 40, it's effectively the same as any other rotary would be. The same amount of time spent in every position.
Okay.
So it's
Perfect.
the slowest, softest hitting kind of thing.
That's awesome.
Wow.
I have not used the 20 for like any shading. I'll probably see how that works then because I just strictly used it for lining so far.
I personally use the 20 for everything.
Okay.
I've experimented with all of them. I just like a hard hitting, fast moving machine.
Yeah, same here.
Like Nick Baxter, he prefers the 28 and he uses it for everything. I have customers who use every single cam and they really want to use them all. I'm not sold on whether or not it seems like it's split between some people want to use all of them and some people find the ones that work like best for them, and then they set up one liner, one shader, and they're good with that.
Nice.
So it's all preference, really. But
yeah, like anything.
I would definitely say experiment with it and see which ones work for you, because it's not the same for everyone.
Definitely. Have you had a chance to use it, Matt?
You know, believe it or not, I was the first one that used hips.
He's usually the first person to like pop the cherry on my new machines.
Yeah, for whatever reason, he'll unpackage a brand new and put it in my hands first. And anyways, it was awesome, but it was still so foreign to me. I didn't get to spend enough time with it.
And it was right after we took your seminar, and he was like pendulum them.
Yeah, I was trying everything new right after your seminar.
Oh, yeah.
How you
had too many new things going on, yeah.
That's right. Everything was foreign, so I can't really speak to it. Yeah.
If you're going to do the pendulum, I would say use the 40.
Well, good. That's good.
Well, Carson, it's definitely been a huge pleasure to have you. I really appreciate you joining us. To our listeners out there, it sounds to me like you've got something to think about if you're in the market for a new machine. It definitely sounds like something worth looking into. Again, we'll put a link down below. For those that are just listening, Carson, do you want to give them a website or something that they can...
Sure. Yeah, it's Neuma Tattoo. That's Neuma tattoo.com. Same name, Neuma Tattoo Machines on Instagram or Facebook and all that stuff too.
And like I said, like go to some of these tattoo forums on Facebook and stuff and start looking around. Like you will read some raving reviews. So it seems to me like a huge success. And as somebody that's known you for a long time, man, I'm proud of you.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Dude, that's so awesome. Do you have time for one more question?
Of course.
I just got one more burning question I've been wanting to ask you.
Sure.
Here you are. You said around 19 or 20. You're new to the game. You're an apprentice. And you have this vision to make a new machine for the tattoo industry. In whether in an energetic level, whether it was outside people, your own self-doubt, thoughts coming to you like, who the fuck do you think you are? The audacity. You don't even really tattoo yet. And now you're talking about building a new machine for us? Who the fuck do you think you are? Right? Any sort of resistance. And then the trial and error over years. I want to know, what do you think actually kept you in this? Staying true to the vision against all odds, even obstacles, and even starting out, and it's not like you had years of validation to even have the right to do that, right? What do you think? Because it seemed like you were all alone. You know, when you do something new, there's no right way to do it. You're the first one doing it. What kept you in the game and then even the 7-year break, and was it that same thing that brought you back to be sitting here having this glorious conversation? Can you pinpoint why do you feel like why you and what kept you in the game?
Yeah, and it might sound like the last thing you expected it to be, but I didn't build these machines for anybody but myself. So I made it for me. I made it how I want it. And I kept making it because I was afraid of not having it. And, you know, and there's other things too, like I was talking about earlier, the fulfillment, satisfaction of, you know, and then there's also been customers who have been really happy with it and have had good things to say, which always has like helped me to feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing and that kind of thing. But it all started because I liked it. And so I was going, you know, people like earlier, Josh was talking about disruptor. Yes. And that's a really good word for this particular machine, because a lot of people hated it. And I'm sure a lot of people hated me because of it. You know, that whole 15 compressors surrounding your booth at a tattoo convention.
Right.
And I get it. You know, I would have been annoyed by that as well. So there was a lot of resistance and there was a lot of pushback, but it never really upset me at all. And I kept doing it because that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted. And that's what I wanted to tattoo with, really. And again, that's what brought me back, because to me, and I don't mean, because again, like I respect everybody in this industry and all machine builders and everything, but for me it was like, and for me, the machines that I was using were missing the thing that I wanted to be there enough that I had to do something about it.
Wow.
So I've had this saying for many years, and like I think Carson's done this. He's had some hiccups, but ultimately Carson put his machine where his mouth is. You know what I mean? So he did build the machine ultimately, especially with the Neuma 4 that he wanted to build. It sounds like we're getting close to it. And I also think that even though in the earlier days when he was an apprentice, and not to answer your question for you, but Carson might have been an apprentice then, but he became a fucking phenomenal tattoo artist.
Yes.
So it's kind of hard not to pay attention. You can hate all you want, but look at the work that was happening. So I don't remember hearing any hate, to be honest with you. This is coming from the guy that wrote a book about how to tattoo, so I know what hate can be. But I don't remember it. I'm sure that there was something there, you know what I mean? But to have that drive, I think your answer of you built them for you, I think that really kind of is the perfect answer.
Yeah, and I think that I feel like I've read that somewhere too. Like they say musicians who are making music for other people aren't going to do very well, and people who write music because that's what they love to do. Like, I think that if there's a lesson to be extracted from that, from anybody listening, it would be something like that. Like, do what you love. And that's how you find something that works.
Yeah. I've always heard the saying, find what you love and let it kill you, which is an odd thing to say, but I kind of get it.
Man.
Yeah, that's cool.
Thank you, Carson.
Yeah, for real. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been too long. Hopefully with all this COVID stuff and all my cancer bullshit getting behind me, we can see each other at a show again.
You look great, by the way.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I get a scan tomorrow. Fingers crossed I am cancer free or at least stable.
Yes.
I'm feeling positive. So this the whole beard thing is like, I'm ready to grow it back. This is from chemotherapy, but
I like it.
Yeah. Nikki likes it.
Man.
It was funny because I shaved it in such small increments. I was like afraid to, I hadn't seen my chin in fucking 30 years, so. But anyway, yeah, man, Carson, I'd love to sit down with you and talk in person about these new things on the horizon. And again, fantastic to have you. Everybody check the website out. If you're having some thoughts, think about it, give Carson an email and go from there and let us know your thoughts. Let us know your thoughts down below for sure.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Carson, we thank you so much. Thank you all our listeners and our viewers for tuning in faithfully every single week. This has been another episode of The Guardian Show. We'll see you all next week. Shout out time, where we come to you faithfully every week to honor and acknowledge one of you faithful viewers and listeners. It means so much to us, all your comments. We thank you kindly. And this week, Hip's got somebody he wants to acknowledge.
I do. And it really stuck out to me. So everybody is familiar with Reinventing That Tattoo app. I'm subscribed to it, and I get a monthly newsletter. So I just opened it up and was scrolling through it, and something rung out by this particular shop. It's Interstate Inc. LA. That is also their name on IG. And they are a recovery-based, clean and sober shop. And that's why they pulled on my heartstrings instantly. So like, they're fighting the good fight. I reached out to them, asked them if I could give them a shout out because I appreciate what they're doing, because we are the minority in the industry, and it's important to make sure we have each other to be accountable for when we're out traveling or guest spotting in shops. We want to be in positive environments. I'm speaking strictly for the dope fiends like myself.
Interstate Inc. LA.
Yes, and that's their IG, Interstate Inc. There is Tattoos by Church.
Ooh.
Amanda.Inc. and Dreadful. You might like him. I do believe he has dreads. But I appreciate you guys fighting the good fight, staying clean and sober one day at a time. Again, Interstate Inc. LA. Shout out. Hey, what's up, everybody? Hip here, coming to you at the end of the episode. And what a great episode it was. And just as promised, Mr. Carson Hill is donating a Neuma to a lucky winner. Man, how do you enter to win? Well, I brought Mr. Matt Clemmer here with me to read off four questions that need answered in order to be entered to win the Neuma 4.
You're going to go straight to YouTube in the comments below this episode and answer these 4 questions. Number 1's easy. Hopefully you know the answer to this. What is your IG handle? Question number 2, how many cams does the Neuma come with? He mentioned it on today's show.
He did.
Question number 3, what the hell is a waveform? That too was mentioned. Question number 4 is a bonus question that had nothing to do with today's episode, a prior episode when we had the great Guy Aitchison on. What is the name of Guy's cat?
Good question.
Submit all 4 of these in the comments on YouTube. You'll be entered to win. It's that simple. But Carson wanted to give something away to the whole world, all of you tattooers.
Man, he did. So Carson and the people over at Neuma, we appreciate you.
Yes.
And at the checkout, whatever you get from Neuma, go into the coupon section and type in Tattoo Guardians and get 10% off.
Anything, any machine you want, 10%. All of you listeners, you don't even got to answer these questions, but if you want to win the new Neuma machine,
it's worth it.
Come on. Answer these 4 questions in the comments at YouTube. You'll be entered to win.
Good
Best
luck.
of luck. Yeah.